Hello, welcome to End of the World Radio. I am your host, Kurt. I have a little bit of a long drive, so I felt the urge to talk about why I converted to Orthodox Christianity. I don't know if I would call it a conversion, or I guess why I started practicing it. Or considering it to be truth or the direction of my spiritual travel. I guess now I've been trying to figure out the description between, or how to describe the difference between worldly truth and ultimate truth. And I think people can be oriented towards truth, and that is if you're oriented towards truth, it's like you're looking in the direction, it's like your being is facing towards the sun, and the world is illuminated, and from that illumination there's philosophy, metaphysics. You see and understand the world, and then you can use your language to describe what you see and what you understand to the limits of your intelligence. And so that's how I would describe most spirituality that I have encountered, is using the light of truth to look at the world. And then there's this next, and when you're looking with the light of truth, it's because you're separate from it. So it's there's spiritual understanding. And that spiritual understanding, it just comes from using the light of truth. And it's like you can use the light of truth for good or bad, or to do really anything you want, and come up with anything you want, any sort of systems or metaphysics or whatever. And all these systems will seem utterly brilliant to people who have not learned how to see the light of truth. So people that are still stuck in darkness or an irrational darkness have very limited senses, and that can make the words of somebody seeing by the light of truth, that makes those words seem captivating, or just completely and utterly and brilliantly true. And so you get the kind of the guru or the groupie effect around people that talk about what they see. Or you get the dismissal of spirituality in general, like the dismissal that anybody could possibly see more than what people see with the physical senses. And so there's that map, or that model there. And then so there's a difference between seeing by the light of truth and then walking towards that light, which is like a very, very interesting metaphysical question of how to walk towards the light of truth, or how to move towards truth. and with the goal of entering into truth, or with the goal of becoming truth. Because after enough time of seeing by the light of truth, it just develops this incredibly stark contrast of, I am not that. And it's like seeing by the light of truth and expounding and creating systems and metaphysics and understanding the world and understanding other people with spiritual vision that uses the light of truth like a sun, that creates, I would say, even a greater feeling of separation and anxiety, because it's like, I feel like kind of life starts out in darkness a lot of the times, or like kind of the world is mostly in darkness, or kind of somewhat in a dark age. And then at some point the faculty by which the light of truth is absorbed like an eyeball or like a photon, this is the ability to see something tantamount to meaning, right? So if I was to describe light as a photon, normal physical light or whatever, the light of the sun, or the light that my eyeballs see, if that's saying I'm seeing like a light wave or a photon, or however that wants to be explained, like the light of truth would be something akin to meaning. The structure of life, the structure of existence, like the meaning of life. Which is the truth of life. So the truth of life emits meaning, like the sun emits light. And that's why people that can't see it become like sort of nihilistic, or start to consider the world meaningless. It's like a blind person thinking that the world is darkness. And so seeing by that light in this way that I'm talking about, where the seeing that transcendent light of meaning, and then using that light, analyzing it to create metaphysical frameworks, or to analyze other people or phenomenon, to come up with knowledge, spiritual knowledge. That creates this, I guess, eventually a cognization of being distant from it, outside of it, apart from it, like as far away from it as we are from the sun. With the same sort of myths and metaphors of like approaching it burning. And so that first awakening from nihilistic rationality into a world illuminated with meaning, I think is sort of like a spiritual epiphany. And then that solidifies this self that is separate from and outside of that, and far, far away from it. Because if you weren't far, far away from it, how could you be interacting with it as this like distant, untouchable luminary? And so that light and that truth like illumines the law or the correct behavior. Like you know what the correct behavior is, like the same light that you can use to understand the world and to create kind of spiritual science frameworks of understanding. I would say this is where all brilliance and genius comes from, is using this light. It also illumines proper action, supreme proper action. Like you know in any moment exactly what to do. There's in addition to being able to see meaning, like this light of meaning illumines the law or illumines the Dharma. You can see it as the route to follow, and everything from footsteps to personal interactions to the orientation of like where the mind is placed. You can see where it is supposed to go. Like there's a truth in action. Like there's intellectual truth, and then there's like truth in action, which is also, it overlaps into skill. Like somebody, if there's something is done skillfully, then this dharma or this law is being followed in that realm. So there's physical laws, there's kind of like symbolic laws, like laws that agree with the narrative or the story or the overall meaning of existence. Those are kind of like the sacramental laws, especially like the old Judaic laws, temple laws. There's movement laws of correct body mechanics, mind state, center of gravity. There's craft laws of how to work with material. And I think all of that is the Dharma or law. Because that, in some sense, that's like the direction of truth. And when you see what the correct action is, because if you were to act as truth, if you were to follow the Dharma, then you would be close to truth, or walking with truth, or even potentially entering into truth, going inside of truth, instead of truth acting as a light that illumines the world, that illumines correct thinking and correct action. Then, hypothetically, there's this ability to merge again with truth instead of being separated from truth. And I would call that theosis, is the Christian terminology of merging with truth, from following the Dharma or following the law. And I think that's what is meant by the Judaic law. Like the law is what saves us, because the law is the light of truth revealing correct action, which is the direction and the location of truth. Like the correct action is the location of truth, right? So these actions can be tiny, like the correct thoughts, correct focus, correct attention, correct movement. And it's every breath and every moment in its totality, and the law reveals somewhat of just how utterly impossible that path is. It's like there's the direction, and it's just infinitely far away when you really start going for it. Because at first you can use the truth to become better than what you see or what you understand. So that's mostly in contrast. So better than other people, better than particular systems, like natural systems, better than the animals. Like you can use the truth to become good at survival, use the truth to become more skilled than other people. So you can develop a correct dharma in this tiny little area of being. But it's like that type of focus requires other aspects of the law, other aspects of the dharma to be broken in order to dominate in the horizontal plane of the social, physical survival sphere, or in the philosophical knowledge sphere. It's like, to make much progress in that, it's under one's own will or under one's own power, requires a particular type of obsession that requires the sacrifice of another good. At least for me, and from what I've seen of human nature, that seems to be the case of it. Seems impossible, because it's like the more of the dharma or the more of the law you learn, the more you see that you're failing it. In addition to just facing utterly obvious failures. And in some sense, it's like the utterly obvious failures help people get to this realization of how far away they are from the truth than the subtle failure of dominating a particular sphere of understanding so as to not have to face where one is weak, or where one is, potentially catastrophically not aligned with truth or with dharma or with skill. So sometimes it seems like very obvious, overt passions or addictions end up inverting the system and taking people to it's like a shortcut of realization, because the problem is so stupid that it becomes very, you get a very accurate picture of where you actually are as an aspect of humanity, or you get a very accurate picture of where all of humanity is, including people that don't look like this, but you get a very accurate picture that like everyone is very, very far away from being able to enact the dharma, or to being able to come near truth in that infinite fractal way, to where every breath and every moment is appropriate. Every interaction is absolutely appropriate, and the truth is self-forgetting as well. So the amount of love and compassion and giving and self-emptying that it requires is just it's not something that can be kept up with. But it's interesting because there's a direction, right? So it's like you can either use the spiritual illumination to have dominion or conquest over the darkened world, right? It's like most people are darkened. So if you have spiritual insight, intuitive insight, then you can have power over this world. Or you can start to walk in the direction of truth, which is this, it seems like an infinite, impossible journey back. And then it seems at times the truth descends and envelops you. So the goal would be to reunify with truth, and then it's like truth descends And suddenly, just like before, it's like where truth was seen from the outside, and the outside was seen by means of the truth, then if by grace the truth can be participated, and you are inside of truth by grace or by adoption of the truth, and that would be grace, is when somebody is fully participating in truth in human form. That's not because they reached truth, it's because for some reason truth came and enveloped them. And there has to be like a willingness to be enveloped. And then this would be heaven, is when one is not separate from truth. So in the heavenly state, there's not very much insight because the perspective has changed. Instead of seeing the world using the light of truth through kind of the egoic lens, which is how most spirituality works, through the lens of the self, then the truth emanates from action. Truth emanates from behavior. It's not an understanding. Not a personal knowing. It's like the grace allows one to participate. And when you're in truth, it's like there's a reality or a realm shift to where it's like you see how the light of the world you see how meaning is created, like the process by which this light of meaning is created. That light is what gives meaning and life to the world, and then that's how the world is even seen. Like everyone is seeing with this light, and then it's like you realize that this fundamental problem is not personal development or acquisition of insight through practice and skill or anything like that. It's like there was a rejection of this light that everyone is otherwise swamped in. Like that's the story of the fall, is this kind of universal rejection of God, this universal rejection of truth, which sets up this situation to where people are outside of truth, but there's nothing else to see by other than the light of truth, other than the light of God. There's nothing else that causes vision, objects to coalesce into things, and for those things to interact in a meaningful way with narrative. Like everyone is doing this, and so everyone's seeing it. So there's not like this blindness necessarily. Mechanically, it's a willful rejection at the soul level. There's no, it has like nothing to do with the pineal gland opening or any sort of like vision or bodily state or practice or anything like that. It's more of a denial of reality. It's like a willful denial of reality, and that willful denial of reality causes logic and reasoning and everything to be somewhat flawed, like ultimately. And then if that denial is fixed, then this whole system snaps back into place, to where there's not like initiates and secret magic powers and special sight and vision and spiritual searches and quests, and it's like everything becomes normal, and normal becomes supernatural. And so normal everyday vision, normal everyday experience, normal everyday life, where there's people, places, objects, sequence of events, like illuminated by meaning, you can, if the truth is accepted and one enters into truth, then you see how this light is created, how this normal is created. And that's a different realm. It's like there's a different realm inside of a light bulb than the realm that the light bulb is creating or illuminating. And so on the inside of that, like on the inside of the sun, you have some process, like some mysterious process generating light. Or you have some process that's generating it, and it's the process that the light of truth is generated by is Christianity. And it's obvious, like when you start going towards it, and then get to this this breaking point of realizing one's own location and accepting grace even once, it's like you kind of see it, and it's an objective truth, similar to like all triangles add up to 180 degrees. Like, as far as I can tell, if when people see it, they all see the same thing. And I've encountered multiple people that have come to it from different paths and different angles, and like we all see the exact same thing. And it's like it's a bizarre supra-rational objectivity. It's as objective as math, but it's about being. It's as objective as math, but without the delusion of objects. It's like it's an objectivity in a non-dual, non-separate world. And then there's this objective nature to the Trinity, and none of this stuff is like understandable. It's just sort of given in the experience of grace, which would be going inside of that which creates meaning in the world. And then that's a different realm, or that's a different layer. So it's like this, because it's like math. There's no math. There's no numbers. There's no anything actually in the human experience or in the human form at that level of objectivity. So like there's no aspects to the soul, or there's no aspects of being that can be counted, and thus they can't be rationally understood. So one could say that there's not truth, but there actually is truth. Like you can at least point at it, even though you can't conceptualize it or put a number around it. And even in the Trinity, it's like, it's kind of, there's an object or a person or persons that can be referenced and pointed at as the creator, or the creator of this whole place, this world. But it's still slippery. Like it's not one thing, it's not three things. It's but it's right. So you can't collapse it into a category, but it's existent, and then also it's beyond existent. Like it is beyond existent because it is that which brings things into existence with its light. And then the process by which this interacts with or connects to the world is Christianity. And so the where I find this most acted out is in traditional Orthodox, like liturgical Christianity. It's not where it's like most expounded. I think that there's Christian groups that are like outside of the truth, that use the truth to recognize what the truth is. Like, you can recognize that the truth is Christ, but the direction of Christ is the Orthodox Church, and is the liturgy, and is the sacraments. It's like by those actions one walks in the direction of truth. And that walk towards the truth is what kind of develops the relationship with truth, which allows for grace to bridge that infinite gap, to actually rejoin with and become one with truth. And I think that's why Orthodoxy doesn't have very much metaphysics coming out of it, even from its illumined saints, is because like when the merging with truth, that whole thing, to where it's like you have some sort of spiritual or intellectual understanding about the world based off of your ability to see. It's just not how it works once theosis has occurred. And then that theosis is like so accessible to anybody, and it's really like it's this, like, we reject it. So the saints are somehow stopped, they cease to reject it, even though it's like this. I think the theosis happens to all. I think theosis happens to a lot of Christians, probably inside and outside of the church, but we reject it. So we reject correct behavior on some particular level. That might mean not doing the sacraments, or it might mean not serving, orienting the mind in the particular. There's a lot of different types of rejection. But as far as I can tell, part of not rejecting grace is participation in the Orthodox Church to whatever means that is possible. You know, because it's whatever the dharma is in that area. If grace is not rejected, you will do that dharma. So there's not really like a question of like, if the dharma is being done Like when I'm aligned with Dharma and there is a church present, I participate. Like what if I'm aligned with Dharma and there is no church present, then obviously I'm not going to participate in a non-existent church in that area, but that does not prevent me from being, that does not prevent theosis. That does not prevent the following of the Dharma in a particular area. So as I've sort of walked through life and had that experience, that's why I don't know if I want to call it converted. I don't necessarily know what that means. It's just like that the liturgy and the sacraments are these just major aspects of the movement of truth that I participate in when under the influence of grace. If present, if practical, if possible, along with a bunch of other different things like that are, my mindset is correct, my focus is correct, my behavior is correct, like all these other things are correct as well, but it's like that's also a correct thing. And then those faculties all seem to be hyper corrective, in that if I fall from grace, the pattern and the function and the movement of the church is this tangible way to reconnect it. It's like the church makes it such that truth is not infinitely far away. And so I mean, like that's the other thing about like, well, what is the direction or the location of the truth? And it's like that is a fascinating metaphysical question to ponder, of like, what's the direction of truth? Because it's not in the direction of anything in this world, while at the same time somehow being in the direction of these sacraments. The same way that the direction of truth is compassion, love. Like those are not things in the world, although you can say like it's very easy to find ways to serve the needy or to sacrifice what you have for the betterment of other people. Like that's you can use the world to find compassion, to find truth. And so the sacraments are interesting in that they are participating in the sacraments is similar in aligning with truth as would be love and compassion, or behaving skillfully, following the Dharma. Which establishes like a relationship with truth, and it's ultimately just very it's very bizarre, because it takes that, it's that most mundane thing, the person. What is going on here? We got a little bit of a traffic jam up in here, out near Sutter Road. Traffic's all jammed up. Alright, that was about 40 minutes, so that puts us at an hour with commercial breaks. Anyway, so that was why I started participating in the Orthodox Church. It's a I guess I would say it's like by grace. It's not comfortable. Like I have a I have a total habit of rejecting all of this relatively frequently, but I've had that like my whole life, and I guess through that you have this experience of grace, which overcomes the rejection. But ultimately, that I don't, it's interesting. I don't. I guess the slightest error just puts one so far away from it that like without this, what could possibly happen to the world other than like a self-willed destruction? And then it's like, what happens when infinite resentment meets infinite compassion? And then you get this middle realm. It's like this whole material realm is like the creation of. It's like the act of redemption running into the act of self-destructive hate. And then that love doesn't overpower free will or freedom, so it creates time.